My name is Emily Carter, and I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in the year 2017 in the bustling city of Dallas, Texas. I'm a 27-year-old graphic designer living in a cozy apartment on the outskirts of the city. My apartment is a modest one-bedroom space filled with the eclectic mix of furniture I've collected over the years. The walls are adorned with colorful artwork, and a large window in the living room allows plenty of natural light to filter in during the day. My kitchen is small but functional, and I've managed to create some delicious meals in its confines. Overall, it's a place I'm proud to call home. As a graphic designer, I spend most of my days working from home, freelancing for various clients across the country. I love the flexibility it affords me, allowing me to set my own schedule and work on projects that inspire me. But sometimes the solitude of working alone can feel stifling, and I find myself craving human interaction. One day, while browsing through Craigslist for potential freelance gigs, I stumbled upon an ad that caught my eye. It was for a graphic design project, offering generous compensation for someone with my skills. Intrigued, I clicked on the ad to learn more. The ad seemed legitimate enough, detailing the project requirements and providing contact information for the supposed client. Without much hesitation, I sent off an email expressing my interest in the project, hoping to land a lucrative gig that would keep me busy for the foreseeable future. To my surprise, I received a response almost immediately. The client, who identified himself as David, seemed eager to hire me for the job and requested that we meet in person to discuss the project further. Excited about the opportunity, I agreed to meet him later that evening at a coffee shop downtown. As I made my way to the meeting spot, a sense of excitement bubbled within me. Landing a high-paying project would be a game-changer for my freelance career, and I couldn't wait to seal a deal with this mysterious client. When I arrived at the coffee shop, I scanned the crowded room for a man who matched the description David had provided in his email. Spotting a figure sitting alone at a corner table, I made my way over, my heart pounding with anticipation. "David," I asked tentatively as I approached the table. The man looked up, his face obscured by the dim lighting of the cafe. "Emily," he replied, his voice smooth and inviting. Relieved that I had found the right person, I took a seat opposite him and began discussing the project details. David seemed knowledgeable about graphic design and spoke passionately about his vision for the project. Despite the initial awkwardness of meeting a stranger, I found myself warming up to him as our conversation progressed. As the evening wore on, David suggested that we continue our discussion at his studio, where he could show me some examples of his previous work. Eager to see more and seal the deal, I agreed to accompany him to his studio, oblivious to the danger that lurked beneath his charming facade. We arrived at his studio, a nondescript building tucked away in an industrial part of town. As we entered, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that washed over me. The space was dimly lit, with shadows dancing ominously along the walls. Ignoring my instincts, I followed David further into the studio, eager to see the work he had promised to show me. But as we reached the back room, my heart sank at the sight that greeted me. Instead of the professional workspace I had expected, the room was empty save for a few rickety chairs and a mattress on the floor. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of the situation. I had walked straight into a trap. Before I could react, David's demeanor shifted, his charming facade melting away to reveal the true intent behind his invitation. With a sinister grin, he lunged towards me, his hands reaching for my throat as he attempted to overpower me. There I was, trapped in that dingy studio with David closing in on me. My heart was pounding like a jackhammer, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to fight back. As he lunged towards me, his hands reaching out to grab me, I knew I had to act fast. With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself at him, my fists flying in a flurry of desperate blows. I didn't have time to think, to strategize. All I could do was react, throwing everything I had into each punch, hoping to catch him off guard. And miraculously, it worked. I landed a solid hit to his jaw, sending him staggering back for a moment. It was all the opening I needed. with a swift kick to his gut. I doubled him over in pain, giving me the chance to break free from his grasp. I didn't waste a second. I sprinted towards the door, my heart pounding in my ears as I fumbled with the handle. It felt like an eternity before it finally swung open, and I stumbled out onto the street, gasping for air. But David wasn't far behind. I could hear his heavy footsteps echoing behind me, his rage fueling his pursuit. I pushed myself to run faster, to put as much distance between us as possible. When I was able to hide, I reached for my phone and dialed 911, my fingers shaking as I relayed the details of what had just transpired. Within minutes, police sirens pierced the air, and I watched with relief as officers swarmed the scene, apprehending David before he could escape. As I stood on the sidewalk surrounded by flashing lights and concerned bystanders, a wave of gratitude washed over me. Despite the terror I had endured, I was alive, thanks to my quick thinking and the swift action of law enforcement. In the days that followed, I grappled with the aftermath of the ordeal, haunted by the memory of what could have been. But with each passing day, I grew stronger, determined not to let fear dictate my life. The perpetrator was a man named Preston Munich, but he often went by the alias David to lure unsuspecting victims into his trap. Preston was a cunning and manipulative individual who preyed on the vulnerable through deceit and trickery. Preston had a history of criminal behavior, with a rap sheet that included charges ranging from fraud to assault. But it was his use of Craigslist as a hunting ground for his nefarious activities that truly earned him notoriety. Using deceptive advertisements for fictitious jobs or services, Preston would entice his victims into meeting him under false pretenses. Posing as a legitimate client or employer, he would gain their trust before revealing his true intentions. Once he had his victim alone, Preston would unleash his violent tendencies, using intimidation and physical force to assert control. His attacks were calculated and ruthless, leaving his victims traumatized and scarred both physically and emotionally. But despite his best efforts to evade justice, Preston's reign of terror came to an end thanks to the courage of individuals like Melissa Thomas, who refused to be silenced by fear. With the help of law enforcement, Preston was apprehended and brought to justice, facing the full consequences of his heinous actions. My name is Sarah, and I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in the year 2004 in Denver, Colorado. I was just a baby at the time, barely a few months old, when tragedy struck my family. My mom, Emmy Duncan, was a young woman facing financial struggles. She saw a Craigslist ad offering free baby clothes and decided to respond, hoping to ease some of our financial burden. Our house in Denver was a modest one, tucked away in a quiet residential neighborhood. It was a cozy place, filled with warmth and love despite our hardships. My mom worked hard to make ends meet, and she always made sure I had everything I needed. On that fateful day, my mom took me with her to the address listed in the ad. Little did she know it would be the last time she would ever hold me in her arms. As my mom and I approached the house listed on Craigslist, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows on the quiet street. My mom said something to me as we climbed the steps, the promise of free baby clothes spurring us forward. The house itself was modest, blending in seamlessly with the row of other suburban homes. Mom knocked on the door, her heart pounding with anticipation. When it swung open, revealing a middle-aged man with a warm smile, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. He seemed friendly enough, his voice full of genuine kindness as he invited us in. When we crossed the threshold, I wriggled in my mother's arms, eager to explore the treasures that awaited us. The man led us into the living room, where a neatly folded stack of baby clothes lay on the coffee table. My mom's eyes lit up with excitement as she went through the clothes, amazed at the stranger's generosity. I wriggled impatiently, eager to try on the new clothes. With a soft laugh, my mother sat me down on the carpet, carefully selecting an outfit for me. I giggled with delight as she threw the soft fabric over my head, the feeling of warmth and comfort enveloping me like a cocoon. But just as my mother was fastening the last button on my shirt, a shadow fell over us, covering the room in a blanket of darkness. Without warning, a man lunged at my mom from behind, his hands closing around her throat in a vice-like grip. I watched in horror as she struggled against him, her screams echoing off the walls of the room. In that moment, the world seemed to slow down, each second turning into an eternity of pain and fear. I reached for my mom, my tiny fingers grasping for air as she struggled against her attacker. Despite her valiant efforts, she could not resist the brute strength of this man. With a sickening thud, my mother collapsed to the floor, her body limp and lifeless. And then the man picked me up in his arms and fled into the night, leaving a devastating trail behind him. For days, I was in the hands of my captor, a man afflicted by some unknown mental disorder. Despite the horror of the situation, he cared for me as if I were his own child. It's a strange thought to be cared for by someone who had caused so much pain and suffering. Meanwhile, the authorities and concerned citizens worked tirelessly to find me and bring me back to safety. It was thanks to their efforts that I was eventually reunited with my grandmother, who took me in and raised me as her own. The man responsible for my mom's murder and my kidnapping was apprehended and brought to trial. It was a long and difficult process, facing the man who had torn my family apart in court. But justice prevailed, and he was sentenced for his heinous crimes. Growing up, I often wondered about the man who had taken me from my mother. What drove him to commit such atrocities? Did he ever feel remorse for what he had done? These questions lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me as I tried to move on with my life. Despite the trauma of my early years, I was fortunate to have a loving family who supported me every step of the way. With their help, I was able to heal and find peace, knowing that I was safe and loved. The events of that day in 2004 will always be a part of me, shaping who I am and how I view the world. But I refuse to let them define me. I am Sarah Duncan, survivor of tragedy, and I will not let the darkness consume me. My name is Jack Thompson, and now I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in the year 2011 in the bustling city of New York. I'm a freelance graphic designer living in a modest apartment in Queens. My place is situated in a quiet neighborhood with rows of similar buildings stretching along the streets, each one telling its own story of the people who inhabit them. My apartment is small but cozy, with walls adorned with colorful posters and shelves filled with designed books and knickknacks collected over the years. A large window in the living room overlooks the street below, allowing streams of sunlight to filter in during the day and the distant sounds of the city to permeate the air. I lead a fairly routine life, spending my days immersed in creative projects and my evenings unwinding with a book or a movie. However, one fateful day, my mundane existence was interrupted by a series of events that would change my life forever. It was a crisp autumn evening when I stumbled upon a listing for a vintage camera on Craigslist. As an avid photographer, I couldn't resist the opportunity to add such a gem to my collection. I quickly contacted the seller, a woman named Mary Stewart, and arranged to meet her in a nearby coffee shop to inspect the camera. As I entered the cozy cafe, I spotted Mary sitting by the window, her blonde hair catching the warm glow of the setting sun. She greeted me with a friendly smile, and we struck up a conversation about our shared passion for photography. Mary seemed like a genuinely kind and enthusiastic person, and I felt at ease in her presence. After examining the camera and exchanging pleasantries, Mary mentioned that she was also selling a few other items, including a laptop that she no longer needed. Intrigued by the possibility of scoring a good deal, I expressed my interest, and Mary agreed to show me the laptop at her apartment, which was just a few blocks away. As we walked through the bustling streets of Queens, Mary talked animatedly about her various hobbies and interests. I couldn't help but admire her adventurous spirit and zest for life. Little did I know, our casual conversation would soon take a dark turn. When we arrived at Mary's apartment building, she led me up a narrow staircase to her unit on the second floor. The apartment was small but tidy, with sunlight streaming in through the windows, casting a warm glow over the space. Mary disappeared into the bedroom to retrieve the laptop, leaving me alone in the living room. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound coming from the bedroom, followed by Mary's panicked voice calling out for help. Without hesitation, I rushed to her aid, only to be met with a horrifying sight. Standing in the doorway was a masked man, brandishing a knife and leering menacingly at Mary. Instinct kicked in as adrenaline surged through my veins. I lunged forward, knocking the man off balance and sending the knife clattering to the floor. Mary seized the opportunity to grab a canister of pepper spray from her purse and unleash a cloud of stinging mist into the attacker's eyes. With a yelp of pain, the assailant stumbled backward, giving us just enough time to make a break for the door. We sprinted down the stairs and out onto the street, where we were met by the reassuring sight of flashing police lights. Mary wasted no time in recounting the harrowing ordeal to the officers, who quickly sprang into action to apprehend the suspect. As the adrenaline began to ebb away, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude towards Mary for her quick thinking and bravery. If it weren't for her resourcefulness, the outcome could have been much more dire. In the days that followed, news of our narrow escape spread throughout the neighborhood, serving as a sobering reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of unity and resilience as the community rallied together to support one another. Mary and I formed a bond forged in the crucible of adversity, and although our paths eventually diverged, the memory of that fateful day would forever be etched in my mind. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that courage can be found in the most unexpected of places. In 2015, in Seattle, Washington, a young woman named Lily was in search of a dance studio to rent. She had a great passion for contemporary dance and aimed to enhance her skills and artistic expression. Alongside her dance practice, Lily maintained a blog showcasing her dance routines and performances. Her dedicated followers admired her talent and commitment to the art form. Browsing through online listings for feasible options, Lily stumbled upon an intriguing advertisement on a community forum. It detailed a charming and spacious studio in a serene neighborhood with polished wooden floors, ample natural light, and a quality sound system. The rental fee was remarkably affordable at $60 per hour. The landlord, known as Mr. Smith, mentioned he was away and unable to give an in-person tour. Instead, he provided photos and a video tour of the studio, along with the access code and address. Impressed by what she saw, Lily decided to book the studio for the following day. She promptly contacted Mr. Smith and processed the payment via an online transaction. Upon receipt, she received a confirmation email containing the relevant information and guidelines. Eager to explore this new space and share her experience with her followers, Lily eagerly prepared for her upcoming dance session. The next day, equipped with her dance shoes, music player, and camera, Lily set out for the studio. She arrived at the location, a 4-story brick building adorned with a sign that read, Dance Haven. Entering the access code on the keypad, she heard a confirming beep, granting her entry. As she stepped inside, she found herself in a dimly lit corridor. Following the signs, she ascended to the 3rd floor where the studio was located. Upon reaching the studio door, Lily entered another code and stepped inside. A smile crept across her face as she surveyed the studio, mirroring the exact ambience depicted in the photos and video. The space exuded cleanliness, comfort, and an inviting atmosphere. Setting up her equipment near the window, she commenced filming her routine for her blog. Introducing herself to the camera, she explained the rental process and her anticipation to showcase her dance moves. Starting with warm-up exercises, Lily elegantly executed stretches and movements, emanating grace and fluidity. Transitioning to more intricate choreography, she performed contemporary dance sequences with finesse, occasionally engaging with her audience through the camera lens. Deciding to conclude her video with a challenging sequence, Lily gracefully executed a pirouette, spinning into a dramatic pose. As she finished the spin, she heard an unexpected click, plunging the studio into darkness. An initial surge of fear coursed through her, leaving her momentarily startled. Attempting to rationalize the situation, Lily considered it might be a power outage or a technical glitch. Contemplating whether to halt the video, she felt an eerie sensation creeping up her spine. Before she could react, a chilling presence enveloped her from behind, sending shivers down her spine. Feeling a sudden pressure against her neck and a sharp prick, a cold sensation followed by a trickle down her throat shook Lily to her core. A sensation of warmth flooded her lungs, shrouding her vision in darkness. A haunting silence overtook her as consciousness slipped away. In the weeks following Lily's disappearance, an air of concern and intrigue enveloped Seattle. Friends, family, and online followers grew increasingly alarmed as Lily's digital presence fell silent. Despite the police investigation tracing back to Mr. Smith and the online trail, the elusive culprit remained untraceable. The building stood vacant, the mystery of Lily's vanishing continuing to baffle those familiar with her and those merely following her dance journey. Efforts to unravel the enigma of Lily's disappearance hit dead ends. The city grappled with theories and speculations, ranging from targeted malice due to her online visibility to wild conspiracy theories alleging a staged event for publicity. Yet, the truth behind Lily's fate remained shrouded in mystery. The studio became a subject of urban legend whispered about cautiously among locals. Some claimed it was haunted, while others deemed it cursed. Few dared to venture near it, and the building fell into disrepair over time. As years passed, memories of Lily and the puzzle of her disappearance faded into the fabric of Seattle. Her blood remained frozen, a poignant reminder of a talented dancer who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only echoes of her captivating performances. The tale of Lily's disappearance lingered as an indelible mystery, a narrative that the city couldn't shake off, a story passed down through generations. The memory of the young dancer who once graced the studio persisted, ensuring that her legacy would endure, forever intertwined with the enigmatic studio's lore. Harini Patel had just moved to Los Angeles from India. She had been living in the city for a few weeks and was still adjusting to her new life. She needed a new phone and decided to buy one from Craigslist, an online marketplace where people could buy and sell items. She found a phone that she liked and contacted the seller, who offered to meet her in the Echo Park neighborhood. Patel was a bit apprehensive about the meeting, but she really wanted the phone, so she agreed to meet the seller. When Patel arrived at the meeting place, a desolate alleyway, she saw the seller standing there, holding the phone. But before she could say anything, the seller attacked her. He stabbed her multiple times, leaving her with severe injuries. Patel tried to fight back, but the attacker was too strong. She collapsed to the ground, bleeding heavily. The passerby found Patel a few minutes later and called the police. When the police arrived, they found her lying on the ground, barely conscious. They rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. Patel died from her injuries at the scene. Los Angeles police launched an investigation into Patel's death. They quickly discovered that she had been the victim of a crime related to a Craigslist transaction. They traced the phone number of the seller and found that it had been used in several other Craigslist-related crimes. The police used the phone number to track down the suspect, a 24-year-old man named David Smith. He had a criminal record for robbery and had been linked to other Craigslist-related crimes. Smith was arrested and charged with murder and robbery. Patel's death was a tragic reminder of the dangers of using Craigslist. It was important for users to take precautions when meeting strangers in real life. They should always be cautious, check the seller's history, and the location of the encounter. They should also report any suspicious activity to the police. Patel's family was devastated by her death. They had lost a daughter, a sister, and a friend. They could not believe that such a horrible thing could happen to someone who was simply trying to buy a phone. They hoped that the police would find justice for Patel. and that her death would raise awareness about the dangers of buying and selling items on Craigslist. In the end, Smith was found guilty of Patel's murder and sentenced to life in prison. While he could not bring back Patel, her family felt some sense of closure, knowing that her killer had been brought to justice. They hoped that her tragic death would serve as a warning to others to be careful when using online marketplaces like Craigslist. The small town of Rivertown in Iowa had never seen anything like it before. The news of a string of murders linked to Craigslist had spread like wildfire, causing panic and fear in the community. The victims, all young and vulnerable, had been lured to their death by a maniacal killer named Robert Benson. The story of Benson and his heinous crimes would later be known as the Craigslist Killer. It all started in the summer of 2016 when a young couple, Emily and Michael, responded to a job advertisement on Craigslist. They were excited to start their new lives together and were thrilled at the prospect of finding work. The advertisement was for a cleaning job at a local motel, and the pay was good. The couple eagerly contacted the poster, a man named Robert Benson, and arranged to meet him at the motel. As they arrived at the location, they were greeted by a tall, lanky man with a sinister grin on his face. He introduced himself as Robert and showed them around the motel. Everything seemed normal until they reached the back of the building, where there was a small room with no windows. Suddenly, Robert pulled out a gun and demanded that the couple give him all their money. In a moment of panic, Michael lunged at Robert, trying to disarm him. However, Robert was too quick for him and shot Michael in the chest. Emily screamed in terror as Robert turned the gun on her and pulled the trigger. The police were called to the scene soon after, and they were horrified by what they found. The couple's lifeless bodies lay in a pool of blood, and the motel room was ransacked. It was evident that the killer had taken their money and fled the scene. The case went cold for a few weeks until another body was found in a similar manner. The victim, a young woman looking for a place to stay, had responded to an advertisement on Craigslist. She was lured to a remote location, where she was brutally murdered. The police soon realized that they were dealing with a serial killer who used Craigslist to lure his victims. The investigation into the Craigslist killer was one of the most extensive in Iowa's history. The police scoured the site, looking for any leads or clues that could help them identify the killer. They combed through hundreds of ads and contacted anyone who had posted an advertisement related to the case. Finally, in a stroke of luck, the police were able to track down Robert Benson and his co-conspirators. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and they were arrested and charged with 10 counts of murder. The trial was one of the most high-profile cases in Iowa's history, and the entire country watched as the gruesome details of the Craigslist killer's crimes were revealed. In the end, Robert Benson was sentenced to 10 life sentences, ensuring that he would never see the outside world again. The case had a profound impact on the community, and the people of Rivertown vowed never to forget the victims of the Craigslist killer. The tragedy also led to stricter security measures on Craigslist, ensuring that buyers and sellers could meet safely and without fear of violence. Years have passed since the Craigslist killer was caught, but the memory of his crimes still haunts the people of Rivertown. They remember the victims and mourn their loss, but they also celebrate the strength and resilience of their community. The Craigslist killer may have left a dark mark on their town, but he could not break their spirit. One day in 2010, a young woman had long wanted a new cell phone. She had been saving up for a long time, but the expense was beyond her control. One day she decided to look on Craigslist, a popular online platform for buying and selling goods, to find a good deal on a cell phone. After a while, she came across a seller who had exactly the model she was looking for and was selling it at a very reasonable price. The woman was excited about this opportunity and decided to contact the seller to arrange a meeting. The seller agreed to meet with her, and they set a date and time for the transaction. The seller invited the woman to come to his home to inspect the phone in person and finalize the transaction. She hesitated, but after some deliberation she agreed. On the day of the meeting, the woman arrived at the seller's house, and he greeted her warmly. He showed her the phone, and she examined it carefully, being satisfied with its condition. The salesman then offered to buy her a cup of coffee, to which the woman agreed. After drinking the coffee, the woman felt sick, but before she knew it, she lost consciousness. When she woke up, she found herself in a dark room, and the salesperson was hovering over her, trying to attack her. She screamed and fought back as hard as she could, but the salesman overpowered her and beat her severely. The woman was in a state of shock and terror, and all she could think about was how to escape. After a while, she managed to free herself and run out of the house. She immediately called the police and reported what had happened. The police began an investigation, and it was later discovered that the salesman had committed similar crimes before. The woman's ordeal was not the first, and certainly not the last. In the end, the seller was caught and brought to justice. The woman was relentless in her desire for justice and determined that the seller be punished for his crimes. After a long and difficult legal battle, the salesman was found guilty of rape and assault and sentenced to a long prison term. The woman was left with physical and emotional scars that would take a long time to heal. But she was grateful for the support she received from her family, friends, and authorities. She was also relieved that justice was served and that the seller would no longer be able to hurt anyone else. In conclusion, this story highlights the dangers of online transactions, especially when meeting strangers in an unfamiliar place. It also serves as a reminder of how important it is to report crimes and seek justice, even though the process can be difficult and time-consuming. This woman's courage and determination testify to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Jessica had been excited to move into her new apartment in Texas. She had found the perfect place and was eager to start her new life. But moving can be a hassle, so she decided to hire someone to help her move her belongings from her old apartment to the new one. That's when she found an ad on Craigslist for a man named Michael who offered his services as a mover. She contacted him, and they set up a time and place to meet. On the day of the move, Jessica met Michael at her old apartment. He arrived in a van and seemed friendly enough. Jessica began to load her belongings into the van while Michael watched. After a while, they were ready to head to the new apartment. Jessica got into her car and followed Michael in his van. When they arrived at the new apartment, Jessica began unloading her belongings while Michael remained in the car. But suddenly, he got out of the van and approached Jessica with a menacing look on his face. He demanded her money and valuables and threatened her with violence. Jessica was shocked and frightened, but managed to give him some money to get him to leave. She was relieved when he got back into the van and drove away. Jessica was in a state of shock after the incident. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she had to report it to the police. She immediately called 911 and provided them with a description of Michael and his van. The police arrived quickly, and Jessica gave them a detailed account of what had happened. They assured her that they would do everything they could to catch the perpetrator. The police wasted no time in tracking down Michael. They used Jessica's description to find his van and apprehend him. Michael was charged with robbery and crimes against the person. The court sentenced him to indefinite imprisonment, and Jessica was relieved to know that he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. In the end, Jessica learned a valuable lesson. She realized that she should have been more careful when hiring someone from Craigslist. She was lucky that she wasn't hurt, but she knew that things could have been much worse. She vowed to be more cautious in the future and to always trust her instincts when dealing with strangers. In the end, Jessica was able to move on from the incident and start her new life in her new apartment. She knew that she would never forget what had happened, but she also knew that she wouldn't let it define her. She was determined to live her life to the fullest and to never let anyone take away her sense of security and peace of mind. I had been looking for a new phone for a while, since my old one was cracked and slow. I didn't have much money to spare, so I decided to check out Craigslist for some cheap deals. I saw an ad for a Samsung Galaxy S10 for only $300, which seemed too good to be true. But I was curious, so I texted the number and asked if it was still available. The seller replied quickly and said yes, it was. They said they had bought it for their partner, but they broke up with them and left the phone behind. They said they just wanted to get rid of it and move on. It sounded genuine and friendly, so I agreed to meet them at a nearby Starbucks the next day. I was excited and nervous as I drove to the meeting place. I hoped the phone was in good condition and that the seller was honest. I had heard some horror stories about Craigslist scams, but I also knew many people who had successful transactions. I figured it was worth the risk for such a bargain. I parked my car and walked to the Starbucks. I looked around for the seller, who had described themselves as a tall, blonde person wearing a blue shirt. I spotted them sitting at a corner table, holding a phone in their hand. They waved at me and smiled. I walked over to them and introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Jessica. You're the one selling the phone, right?" They nodded and stood up. They were taller than I expected and had a muscular build. They had piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. They looked like a model, not a scammer. "Hi, Jessica. I'm Ryan. Nice to meet you. Here's the phone. It's in perfect condition. You can check it out if you want." They handed me the phone and I took it. It looked new and shiny, with no scratches or dents. I turned it on and saw that it was unlocked and had no password. I browsed through the apps and settings, and everything seemed fine. I was impressed and happy. "Wow, this is amazing. It's exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much. How do you want me to pay you?" They shrugged and said cash is fine. "Do you have it with you?" I nodded and reached for my purse. I had withdrawn $200 from the ATM earlier and had it in an envelope. I opened my purse and took out the envelope. As I did, I noticed that Ryan's smile changed. It became colder and more sinister. They glanced around and then leaned closer to me. "Listen, Jessica. I'm sorry to do this, but I need you to give me all your money. Not just the $200, but everything you have. And your purse too. And your car keys. And don't make a scene, or I'll hurt you. Do you understand?" I felt a surge of fear and disbelief. I realized that I had been tricked. They were not a seller, but a robber. They had lured me into a trap with a fake phone and a fake story. They were probably not even Ryan. They were a criminal, and I was their victim. I tried to act calm and said, "What? What are you talking about? This is a joke, right?" They shook their head and said, "No, it's not a joke. It's very serious. And you better do what I say, or you'll regret it. I have a knife in my pocket, and I'm not afraid to use it. So hand over your money, your purse, your keys, and your phone. Now." They reached for the envelope in my hand, but I pulled it back. I was scared, but I was also angry. I had worked hard for my money, and I was not going to give it up so easily. I decided to fight back. I said, "No, I won't. This is my money, and you can't have it. You're a liar and a thief, and I'm not going to let you get away with this. Help! Someone help me. This person is trying to rob me." I screamed as loud as I could, hoping to attract attention and help. I hoped that someone would hear me and come to my rescue. I hoped that Ryan would get scared and run away. I hoped that I would be safe. But none of that happened. Instead, Ryan grabbed me by the hair and pulled me towards them. They put the knife to my throat and said, "Shut up, you stupid person. You just made a big mistake." The world spun as I felt a sharp pain radiating from my head. Everything went black as I lost consciousness. When I regained awareness, I found myself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptics and the gentle beeping of machines. My head throbbed with dull ache, and I felt disoriented. A nurse noticed my stirring and rushed to my side. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" they asked with a mixture of concern and relief. I struggled to collect my thoughts. What happened? I managed to croak out. You were attacked, the nurse explained gently. Someone found you unconscious near the Starbucks where you were supposed to meet someone. You've been here for a few hours now. Do you remember anything? Bits and pieces of the harrowing encounter flooded back into my mind. The fake ad, the meeting with the seller, the sudden shift from cordiality to aggression. And then the blow to my head. I remember, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. The nurse offered a comforting hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, you're safe now. The police are investigating, and they caught the perpetrator. They're going to face justice for what they did to you. Relief washed over me, mixed with gratitude for the swift action of law enforcement. Despite the trauma, I felt a glimmer of hope, knowing that the person who had inflicted such terror upon me would be held accountable for their actions. As I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by the warmth of compassionate care, I resolved to reclaim my sense of security and resilience. Though scarred by the ordeal, I refused to let fear dictate my life. With each passing moment, I grew stronger, determined to emerge from this darkness with renewed strength and purpose.